Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the secrets of Ottoman statecraft. And let me tell you, it's a fascinating story. We're going to explore how one of history's greatest empires dominated world affairs for centuries by doing something that seems unthinkable today, by rejecting the permanent ambassador.
All right, let's just jump right into the big puzzle. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the Ottoman Empire, a true global superpower, had absolutely no permanent ambassadors stationed in Europe. Now, in our modern world, that sounds like a massive diplomatic handicap, right? But for the Ottomans, this wasn't a weakness at all. No, it was a carefully calculated strategy and a powerful statement to the rest of the world.
Now, it's easy to look back and think this absence of ambassadors was just neglect. A sign that they weren't interested in the outside world. But the truth is so much more interesting. It reveals a system of diplomacy that was radically different, totally intentional, and, for its time, profoundly powerful.
To really get our heads around this, we have to stop thinking in modern terms. You see, the Ottomans weren't playing by European rules because they saw the entire world through a completely different lens. Their whole approach to foreign relations was built on a foundation that was uniquely their own.
So, at the very heart of this worldview, which was based on Islamic law, was this fundamental division of the world into two spheres. You had the House of Islam and the House of War. And look, this wasn't just a map with lines on it. It was a political and religious framework that dictated everything, especially how they could, and more importantly, how they couldn't interact with non-Muslim powers. So what did this mean in practice? Well, instead of seeking permanent peace with non-Muslim states, which was seen as basically impermissible, they would grant temporary truces. Think about that phrasing. They weren't negotiating as an equal. They saw themselves as the supreme authority granting a temporary pause in hostilities. So sending a permanent ambassador would imply equality, and that was a concept they just flat out rejected. And this is the crucial point, you guys. This wasn't a lack of diplomacy. It was a completely unique and highly effective system tailor-made for a superpower. They didn't need permanent embassies because they had a different, and you could argue, a more flexible toolkit for getting things done. They basically relied on three key pillars. First, you had these temporary envoys sent out with laser-focused missions. Second, they used the sheer spectacle of ceremony as a weapon of statecraft. I mean, every reception was this meticulously planned performance designed to scream power. And third, they had this incredibly sophisticated intelligence network that made permanent embassies, which are really just official listening posts, kind of redundant. And the process for these missions, it was ruthlessly efficient. An envoy had one job: deliver a message, negotiate one specific point, or gather some intel. That's it. Then they returned home immediately. There was no small talk, no setting up a permanent residence, just pure, focused statecraft. Now, this system didn't mean the Ottomans were isolated. Not at all. In fact, it was the complete opposite. The Sultan's court in Istanbul was the center of European diplomacy. I mean, check out this quote. You have the Venetian envoy and the French ambassadors so desperate for influence that they're actually conspiring to block England from even getting a seat at the table. Everybody knew real power flowed from Istanbul. But, okay, how did this system hold up when it was under extreme pressure? Well, the ultimate test came in 1571 with the legendary Battle of Lepanto. This was a moment where pure military force clashed head-on with the empire's unique diplomatic strategy. On paper, the outcome was an absolute catastrophe for the Ottomans. Their navy was just annihilated in this massive battle. It was a decisive, celebrated victory for the European coalition. To everyone at the time, it really seemed to spell the end of Ottoman dominance at sea. But, and this is what's so amazing, and it perfectly illustrates the power of their system, just 2 years later, Ottoman diplomats skillfully negotiated a peace treaty that was so favorable to them that a European observer actually said it was as if they had won the battle. They turned a devastating military loss into a stunning diplomatic victory. Incredible. This incredible system of supremacy, though, couldn't last forever. The world was changing. The global balance of power began to shift pretty dramatically, and that forced the Ottomans to adapt or risk being left behind completely. And this timeline here, it shows you exactly how that shift happened. A series of military defeats, the rise of new rivals like Russia, it all forced the Ottomans to slowly, reluctantly, give up their claims of superiority. You can see it step by step, from acknowledging an emperor as an equal in 1606, to finally, in 1793, sending their first permanent ambassador.
They were basically forced to adopt the European model just to survive. So let's circle all the way back to our original puzzle and put these final pieces together. Why didn't they have permanent ambassadors for so long? Well, we know now the answer was never about negligence or weakness. Here's the big takeaway for you. The Ottoman refusal to send permanent ambassadors was a deliberate, powerful expression of their perceived world supremacy. In their worldview, sending an envoy to live in a foreign court was a sign of inferiority, of being a lesser power. They received ambassadors, they didn't send them. It really was the diplomacy of an empire at its absolute peak, a system that worked perfectly until that supreme power began to fade. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative question to think about. Is diplomacy truly a tool for building bridges between equals, or has it always been, at its very core, a weapon used by the powerful to impose their will on the rest of the world?